I've been studying philosophy for more than a decade now, and something I'm sick to death of hearing is the stupid phrase, philosophy is useless. It's a silly objection that is raised time and time again against studying philosophy. And the worst thing is that it isn't even a recent objection. Take, for instance, the story of Thales of Miletus, the first philosopher. It's said he was once so absorbed in gazing at the sky and contemplating his own thoughts that he didn't notice the ground beneath him and fell straight into a well. A slave girl, watching from a distance, couldn't help but laugh, saying, "What good is all your knowledge if you can't even see where you are walking?" As you can see, philosophers have been hearing this same taunt, "What's the point of philosophy?" since the very moment we first walked the earth and started falling into wells. The underlying message is always the same: philosophy is useless, a waste of time, something no one should bother with. And no matter how many times we answer this accusation, no matter how well we expose the bias behind it, this question, this objection, refuses to die. It keeps coming back, like an unkillable zombie, haunting every new generation of philosophers. Even worse, the foolish argument that philosophy is useless is especially prevalent today when everything is expected to have an immediate, tangible utility, or be discarded altogether. I must confess that whenever I hear this objection, I am always tempted to explode and say, "It is you who are useless, you ignorant son of a..." But I usually cannot be that frank. So in today's video, I am going to give you 3 different and more civilized answers to this criticism that will hopefully silence it forever. Answer number 1. The first thing to establish when trying to understand the importance of philosophy is this: philosophy is inevitable. Like Thanos, period. In fact, anyone who claims that philosophy is useless and that we shouldn't waste our time with it is doing 2 things. 1, he's making a value judgment, and 2, he's drawing from it a normative conclusion. He is saying this is what should be done. But both of these are loaded with philosophical assumptions. Why do we assign a negative value to something that is useless? Why shouldn't we spend our time on it? What should we devote our time to instead? If the critic of philosophy wants to answer these questions, they will have to engage in philosophical reasoning, and by doing so, they are undermining their own argument by partaking in the very thing they claim we should not do. The truth is, no one can completely avoid philosophy. That's simply not possible. The only way you could do it is by falling into a coma when you are 2 years old, waking up from it when you are 80, and then immediately dying afterwards. Congratulations, you escaped philosophy altogether. But beyond that, at some point in your life, you will engage with philosophical questions, whether you realize it or not. And that goes for every single human being. Philosophy is simply ingrained in our very nature. It is part of what makes us human. All of us have asked and will continue to ask philosophical questions, no matter how useless they may seem on reflection. It's just who we are. We want to know where we came from, where we are going, what we should do, why we must die, and whether there is an ultimate explanation for reality that can make sense of everything we go through. These are all questions we gripe with throughout our lives. So the truth is, we couldn't escape philosophy even if we tried. Even the staunchest opponent of philosophy moves through life guided by a set of implicit philosophical assumptions, deep-seated ideas about the world, human nature, life, destiny, and meaning. Ignoring philosophy won't make it disappear. It will only leave you with a philosophy you are unaware of and whose origins you don't understand. Thus, the only alternative to thinking philosophically for yourself is to live according to the philosophy of other people. A person that does not philosophize will uncritically adopt the prevailing ideas of their time and place without ever realizing it. You cannot avoid philosophy. You can only ever avoid either good philosophy or bad philosophy. And here is where an important question arises. If no position can be defended without ultimately relying on philosophical reasoning, and if we are going to ask philosophical questions and we are going to live by some implicit philosophy anyway, why shouldn't we do it properly? At the very least, we should investigate what minds far wiser than ours have thought about the great questions that keep us up at night. We should seek to sharpen our intellectual tools and ground our worldview in ideas we have consciously examined and made our own. And that is precisely what philosophy is for. Which brings us to the second answer. But before we get there, make sure to boost the like button if you are enjoying this video and subscribe for more philosophical content. Let's get back to it. Answer number 2. The next thing I want to bring up is whether the statement philosophy is useless is actually true. What I find is that in a broad sense of utility, philosophy is indeed very useful. Studying philosophy will help you develop critical thinking, the ability to evaluate and construct arguments, distinguish logic from rhetoric, recognize valid reasoning, and spot fallacies all around, all of which are invaluable skills in the 21st century. Additionally, philosophy exposes you to different perspectives on the world. This trains you to approach problems from multiple angles, while also making you aware of the biases of your own time, the invisible lens through which we all see the world without realizing it. As we have discussed previously on this channel, philosophy encompasses a vast range of fields, the study of how we should act, what a good life consists of, and how to achieve it. And really, what could be more useful than stopping to reflect on how we want to live? Not to mention the pressing moral and political dilemmas we face as a society. Philosophy ponders questions like what obligations do we have towards each other? How far should state power extend? How do we build a just society? And that is just one aspect of life we study in philosophy. Another key branch of philosophy is the philosophy of science. Can science exist without philosophy? Yes, in a certain sense. Can science be defended without philosophy? Not at all. One can do science without consciously engaging in philosophy, but not without relying on a whole set of implicit philosophical assumptions that validate the scientific method as a reliable method of knowledge. That's precisely why, when science is challenged by a form of skepticism that questions its very foundations, the only true ally that can come to its defense is philosophy. And then there's the question of interpretation about scientific results, which is equally important. What do scientific findings actually mean? Does science prove that we are not free, for instance, or is that open to interpretation? What exactly is a law of nature? If time's passage is an illusion, as some interpretations of general relativity suggest, what are the philosophical implications? To answer, or at least to try to answer all these questions, and many, many more, we need philosophy. If one thinks science is useful, then one must realize that philosophy is both at the beginning and at the end of science. For it is that discipline that studies the assumptions of science, those ideas without which science could not even be possible, and also the very thing we need to properly read and understand many of its data. Thus, if science depends on philosophy to justify its foundations and interpret its results, then maybe, just maybe, we should value philosophy too? At this point, the person that is asking in bad faith what philosophy is good for usually shifts the goalpost. They will say, yes, fine, maybe philosophy will help you develop some thinking habits and provide tools for tackling difficult problems. But aside from that, what does it produce that is tangible? That's the real question. Medicine cures cancer. Engineering takes us to the moon. Economics helps rebuild nations. What does philosophy accomplish in this sense? And that brings us to the third and final answer, which happens to be my personal favorite. Answer number 3. The third answer to the objection that philosophy is useless is simply this. Yes, philosophy is useless, and that is perfectly fine. Why shouldn't it be? Philosophy is not and does not claim to be a productive science. It is not a discipline justified by some extrinsic product, the way carpentry is justified by the table it creates. No. Instead, philosophy offers you a kind of knowledge, a kind of experience that is valuable in and of itself, not as a means to something else. And whoever insists on instrumentalizing philosophy, trying to make it serve some other ulterior purpose, has ultimately missed out on the very best philosophy has to offer. Look, in the 4th century BC, Aristotle responded to this same question by making the following distinction. Philosophy is more like zoology than fishing. We humans fish primarily to eat, okay? But why do we engage in zoology? We study animals not because this serves some practical purpose, like the ability to construct better and more efficient traps. No, we study animals because learning about them is inherently beautiful and rewarding. And that encompasses the essence of my third answer. Consider a more contemporary example, physics. I am sure everyone here will agree that physics is an incredibly useful science. It has given us and continues to give astonishing technological advancements. But is that the reason we do physics? I would argue no, we do physics because the universe fascinates us and we want to understand how it works. I will go as far as to say that even if physics gave us nothing beyond that knowledge, we would still pursue it. We'd do physics even if we had achieved technological perfection and all our basic needs were covered. Why? Because the desire to understand is more fundamental than any of its practical applications. Anyone who says otherwise subordinates the greater to the lesser. So if that is true for physics, isn't it even truer for philosophy? A discipline built upon the foundations of wonder and understanding? Philosophy seeks the final knowledge of things, a kind of knowledge that is valuable in and of itself, not because it leads to something else, and there's nothing shameful about that. This is why when someone objects that philosophy is pointless, that it serves no practical purpose, the philosopher merely chuckles, amused by the ignorance of the poor fool who cannot grasp the value of that which is useless. Now that you know how to answer this attack against philosophy, your next question should be, what does philosophy study? Because you may not know this, but philosophy actually contains a myriad of branches and subdisciplines. It can tackle a whole lot of topics. Luckily for you, in our next video, I'll give you a nice and easy tour along this leafy tree of philosophy. So click here and keep learning everything you need to know about philosophy. Oh, and don't forget to think.